Hi everyone, welcome to the channel this evening. Tonight I'll be speaking to Amy Proal, a microbiologist from Massachusetts. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Hey, good to meet you.
Tell us a bit about yourself, what you studied and what you're working in now, and what's led you to working with long COVID and chronic fatigue syndromes and Lyme disease, I believe, as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So I'm the president of Polybio Research Foundation, and we're a nonprofit organization. And our goal is to study the chronic consequences of infection across a
Mm.
wide range of diseases. And that includes viral infection, it includes bacterial infection, and it includes fungal infection. And part of that,
Mm.
the central trend of what we're studying and also working to try to treat is this basically just known phenomenon in which almost every pathogen, so viral pathogens like Zika virus or Ebola virus, or bacterial pathogens like the Lyme pathogen, Borrelia, are associated with a syndrome or a condition, whatever you want to call it, where a subset of people who are infected do not get better and instead just develop what can be extremely debilitating chronic symptoms that can last a lifetime. And the most
Mm.
recent example of that is long COVID. I mean, like we now watch this unfortunately play out on this global level where with the COVID pandemic, people started to get SARS-CoV-2, and up to the U.S. CDC estimates that up to 6% of Americans have some form of long COVID or chronic symptoms after COVID where they're still not okay. So what we're
Mm.
studying is why, and we're trying to figure that out. And that's the main what I work on every day. You know,
That
um,
is
yeah.
incredible. Mm. In terms of like research and what you're doing day to day, what are you looking at? Is it samples from like microbiome in your gut, or is it blood samples? Like, if you can share a bit about that, yeah.
No, that's a great question. So I'm the like in a directing position where what I do is oversee all the research in sort of a very big picture capacity. So every day I'm
Mm.
not the person in the lab that's working on the samples,
Mm.
but
Hmm.
I help put together the larger vision of what kind of samples are even going to be collected and what trends we're going to look
Mm.
at and what we're going to try to
Mm.
find in the samples, right? So what we did through Polybio, especially when long COVID just broke out, is we created a
Mm.
group or a consortium of researchers from different academic institutions actually across the globe. So there's teams that
Mm.
are in the US, for example, like at Harvard or at UPenn or at University of California, San Francisco. And then there's also teams
Mhm.
that are part of our consortium that are in France, for example, at Institut Pasteur there, or in Sweden at the Karolinska
Mm.
Institute. And we tried very hard to bring all these teams together to coordinate on how we would study the most root cause drivers of what we thought was causing long COVID. In other words, we
Mm.
we
Mm.
don't we don't want just to document symptoms and to figure out how to knock symptoms down. We want to understand the root reason why people are sick
Mm.
and to really figure out how to target
Mm.
those root cause problems. And to
Mm.
design those studies, my colleague, Mike Van Elziger, who works with me at Polybio, and he's also a neuroimmunologist at Harvard, we wrote a paper in
Mm.
2021 that delineated basically kind of top mechanisms for long COVID. And and the
Mm.
first one, which is the one that we put the most research effort into, and we see actually a lot of growing evidence for, is this really straightforward possibility that at least a portion of patients with long COVID and ongoing symptoms just haven't fully cleared the SARS-CoV-2 virus from their bodies. And instead, a
Wow.
small amount of virus, a
Mm.
little bit of it, of the backbone, or even potentially a little bit of replicating virus persists, especially, for example, in patient tissue, where it may not be well
Mm.
recognized by the immune system, and it kind of hides out and could, then drive a wide range of immune and even metabolic problems, right? Now, the
Mm.
hard
Mhm.
thing, the challenge in studying this persistence, or what we call SARS-CoV-2 reservoir in long COVID, is that
Yes.
the virus, if it persists, doesn't necessarily just persist obviously in blood. So if you go to the doctor and they draw some blood, even if they look for it with like the tools in the clinic, they're not going to find it. Like, it's not going to be there free floating in blood, because that's just it's a dumb thing for viruses to do. Like, if you're going to hide out someone, being in the blood is where the immune system is most robust, and all the immune cells are going to. So instead of free floating often in fluids like blood, the virus will go hide, in simple terms, in tissue. So for example, like the tissue lining the gut, or the tissue of the lungs, or potentially, right, like nerve tissue even, right? So to find it, then we have to design studies, and this is what we have been doing, where we collect tissue samples from patients with long COVID via a biopsy procedure. So we have groups, for example, a team at University of California, San Francisco, that does a procedure where they can get gut tissue from patients via like a sigmoidoscopy procedure. There's a team in the UK that's using a bronchoscopy procedure to get lung tissue from patients with long COVID. There's a group at Penn that's using like a small, like fine needle, carefully, done biopsy to get a little bit of lymph node tissue, which is like a very important sort of immune from patients with long COVID. And that's one of our top priorities, is getting these samples from patients so that we can look for persistent, virus in those tissues, in addition to fluid. So that's like one aspect of our program, right? Is doing that kind of work. Yeah. But there's really a lot of other things we're looking at too. Like, we're looking at, for example, also the effect of the virus on the body's ecosystems, the human microbiome. So, people, I think many people know that the gut harbors a lot of organisms, like communities or ecosystems of organisms, but actually, and those are called the human microbiome, but those communities extend to actually a lot of even other body sites. And a known trend is that if someone gets a new infection, sometimes the inflammation or the imbalance from that infection can actually throw off the balance of those ecosystem communities, right? So we have studies looking at that. So there's a range of different topics we're looking at in patients with long COVID. And basically working as a group allows us to kind of coordinate so that we're able to kind of capture these trends, especially at different sites.
It's really, really cool to hear that. I must say, I was really excited to come across your Twitter page, and just excited to connect with you, because I've actually, some of the listeners will know, I've been battling for over 2 years now, since March 2022, with long COVID. I did have 2 Pfizer vaccines 4 months prior, and I think the second vaccine might have done something to me, but it's very hard for me now at this point to look back and know, like, how much is vaccine-related injury or a side effect, which it could be. And there's people I've interviewed who have purely just injuries, but then how much is the actual acute infection? And is it a combination of both that's made it worse? Is it one or the other? Because there's a lot of people online that will also comment on the videos and say, no, long COVID isn't real. It's a long vax. That's what you have. But I have people firsthand, friends that I know, who are struggling 2-3 years on, who never touched a vaccine. And it's kind of like this unhelpful narrative. But I wanted to ask on that topic, have you looked at viral persistence in people with vaccine versus just acute infections, and a bit of both? And what kind of data are you seeing there?
No, so that's a really important consideration that you brought up, because I've heard the same thing, which is like, there's no long COVID. It's just problems with the vaccine. And, I'm not even saying that there aren't problems with the vaccine, but it's like two things. This is what I think people need to understand. Like, just because there could be issues with the vaccine doesn't mean that people aren't also getting sick after infection with the virus itself, right? And it kind of makes sense if you think about it, that both, and again, my expertise is not the vaccine. So because I'm a microbiologist, virologist, I know a lot more about like the virus cases than the vaccine. But like, I do have colleagues who are studying like people after the vaccine, and we know that, yes, we do know that some people, are developing symptoms after the vaccine. And of course we know that, but many people, I'm just going to say, many people really are developing symptoms after the virus. It just absolutely is happening. So, but to me, like, even if vaccine and virus are both, issues, what I think, like, there's commonalities is one would just be like the spike protein. Like what we find in patients with long COVID, let's say they haven't fully cleared the virus, one of the trends that seems to be happening is that maybe the virus is in tissue, but spike protein that it's still creating kind of leaks into the blood. And then it can set off like all these clotting and blood vessel and other types of issues. And that could be happening from the virus, right? Like, because you have the virus is still in your body. With the vaccine, again, like, not my area of expertise, but like, certainly, you have like a spike protein, like from the vaccine. Maybe there's some kind of parallel between something that could go wrong a little bit in some certain people with the vaccine and spike, and again, like viral persistence in some people tied to spike. So like, it's not surprising to me that people could develop some common symptoms after a vaccine or after the infection because of like common things like spike protein or whatever, right? Like, but I think it's important for people looking at the vaccines to acknowledge that people do get sick after the virus too, because I really don't like, I know people who are like, I'm not getting the vaccine. All right. But then they don't care at all about getting COVID. And I'm not saying like go hide in your house and like lock yourself down. I just mean though that like, if you're worried about the vaccine, like you would want to be a little worried about the virus, because it has like, it is the virus that gets in your body and releases a bunch of spike proteins. Like, I mean, like it is has many parallels to, so I do think like that's like one, and I get it, because the pandemic has been so confusing. And so, you know what I mean? Like, well, we were told about like what's happening, and like how we were not even correctly told by governments like how the virus spreads. Like the virus spreads in aerosolized virus. Like it doesn't matter. Like so for example, if someone's near you and they're 6 feet away and they're just breathing in your space, you can totally get it. Like, but we have this ridiculous like 6 foot rule made up, like these things like that. Just, I feel like lost people's trust in this. It's like, okay, like there were way too many, contradictions, like do this, no, do that, don't do this. Like, and I think the vaccines were also somewhat oversold. Like we were told like, oh, if you get vaccinated, you won't get COVID, when really the only thing that the vaccines were shown to do was potentially decrease severity of disease, not even prevent you from getting the virus. So like, I understand why there is a lot of confusion, but it is really important for people to understand that, like, if you're worried about the vaccine, you should also be like somewhat worried about the virus. Like getting, this is the thing, getting, COVID like 3 times a year for the rest of your life is probably not great. And that's what we are trying to fix. Like we don't want that either. You know what I mean? Like we don't we don't want that either. So that's the thing is like, so that's one thing. Going back again to the vaccine and long COVID, I actually think one other parallel, and again, like, I don't study the vaccines, but I've had friends who, for example, one of our friends got vaccinated. This is a while ago. He got the vaccine and he just broke out in shingles, which is a herpes virus. So, which makes sense in a way, because the vaccine is an immune challenge. Like what it's doing is it's creating, the spike protein, and then saying like to your immune system, like, okay, recognize this, go after it, form antibodies, so it picks up your immune system to try to do all these, things in order to form antibodies. And if that happens, where the immune system kind of activates as part of the vaccine, it can maybe kick up other things. So for example, if you have a dormant herpes virus, like a lot of us do, like the Epstein-Barr virus, or like, it's like a really good opportunity for the vaccine to kind of like wake that up as part of what it does. So like
Wow.
I'm not even saying of
Mm.
some people after the vaccine could be that they have kind of a pathogen like a herpes virus, even in some cases something like Lyme, I'll be honest with you, that they just don't know they have. And the vaccine sort of awakens their immune system to this other
Mm.
infection. And I say that because we see
Mm.
that in long COVID. Like one of the bigger trends that the
Mm.
virus does too is like it kind of knocks the immune system or challenges the immune system. And we see reactivation of Epstein-Barr virus and
Mm.
sometimes these other viruses in people. And it's no joke. Like if you
Yeah.
reactivate Epstein-Barr virus, it can cause profound chronic symptoms. I mean, that has been like
Yeah.
connected to all kinds of chronic. In fact, it's even been connected directly to multiple sclerosis. Like in the last year,
Mm. Mm.
two huge papers came out showing that like the immune system targeting an Epstein-Barr virus protein in the brain is what leads to kind of like a cross-reactive response to target human brain tissue that could underlie multiple
Wow.
sclerosis. So like it's no
Yeah.
joke to like, so that's one thing with the vaccine is like, I feel like in a portion of people, it's kind of kicking up stuff that
Mm.
we see that with long COVID
Yeah.
too, you know, and I don't know if that's an
Mm.
explanation for everyone, but I think that that's another like kind of common trend between what the vaccine and the virus can be doing. That's just not helpful. Right.
Mm.
So
Mm.
yeah,
I
but
can
there's,
say in sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say
Yeah.
I can relate to exactly what you just said. I went to see a specialist in Cape Town, South Africa,
Yeah.
where I'm based, and she was picking up signs that I had glandular fever, and I said, "No, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like this is post
Right.
my vaccine, post infection now, towards the end of the year. So this is now like probably 6-7 months later." Dealing
Yeah.
with this debilitating fatigue, thinking I've got some kind of
Exactly.
chronic fatigue syndrome. She was saying post-viral fatigue, and I thought, okay, that what does that mean though? Like, what do I do? And she's like, no, I think it's what people are coining long COVID, and it was like a kind of a scary moment. I've had I guess during my younger years, school, high school, what you'd
Mm-hmm.
call your college, I guess, high school.
Yeah.
I did
Okay.
used to get cold sores, like if I was under lots of stress, if my immune system was run down. So I'm almost wondering,
Yeah.
like, man, like if I had known that anything that's related to the herpes virus or Epstein-Barr, the glandular fever, we call it here in South Africa, I think.
Yep.
If I'd known that I was susceptible to reactivation of things, I probably wouldn't have touched the vaccines. But
I know.
anyways, it's what's done is done now. But sorry. On that note,
Yeah. I
I've
agree.
been on blood thinning medication, anticoagulants for 10 months now. Actually working with Jaco Laubscher, you'll know, and Rezia at the
Yeah.
Stellenbosch University. I
Yeah.
actually live and work in Stellenbosch at the moment,
Cool.
and it's been really interesting doing that journey. But during this process of testing for the microclots and the hyperactivation of platelets, I've done a test for IgG antibodies for spike antibodies in my blood,
Okay.
and those are
Yeah.
showing extremely high levels, over 18,000 for both tests, 6 weeks apart,
Wow.
when they're meant to be under 50. And I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, how can my body still have all these spike antibodies flying around 2.5 years after vaccination, 2 years post-infection? Haven't had another infection, but I'm just like, that's ridiculous. Like, do I have a vaccine injury? I can't definitively prove that, but a lot of people
Yeah.
that I speak to suspect. They're like, oh no, it's the vaccine. That's why you got that, But like you say, there is the case of viral persistence. If it's leaky gut, like you've said, with gut
Totally.
issues and it's leaking into the blood, or if it's
Totally.
just in the tissues and there's been so much damage and blood vessel damage and things, your body is still hasn't found all the spikes. So I'd love you to
It's
share a bit about
totally.
those. Yeah.
I mean, your case is interesting. Like, first of all,
Yeah.
that glandular fever component isn't surprising,
Mm.
especially if your symptoms are a lot of fatigue. Like
Mm.
those are like core kind of herpes virus type symptoms. And the thing is,
Mm.
the vaccine or the virus might have, so like you could have had like 4 hits on the same kind of reactivation. You know what I mean? You could have keep
Yeah.
provoking some herpes virus out, which is not
Yeah.
great. So in that sense, like
Yeah.
trying to mitigate that is something you should keep looking into. With the spike,
Mm.
though, it's not surprising. We also see elevated spike antibodies in a lot of, these are people after the virus, and we control a lot for vaccination. And in fact, a lot of what the studies where we most analyze spike, the patients weren't even vaccinated. We do this on purpose because like to try to obviously
Yes,
rule
yeah.
that out. So there's, for example, some papers where no one was vaccinated and yet they still have spike in their blood up to 14 months after infections. That's where we think it's coming from
viral
the virus.
persistent, yeah, without
Absolutely. Yeah.
vaccination. Yeah. That's
Yes,
really
we've seen that.
scary. Wow.
So a study is going to come out soon from this team again at University of California, San Francisco, showing in gut tissue from long COVID patients double-stranded RNA, which indicates active viral replication in the gut tissue of patients with long COVID. Again, like infected with the virus, pretty sure no vaccine. I could double check that, but like, I mean, but it's again, the virus is there. Like it's not just, it's like the viral viruses up to over 2 years. Some of the patients that were found were, yes, over 2 years after being sick. So it's not impossible that you could still have some virus in you. And that's like, the thing is, I don't know what to do about this since I'm not a vaccine and I wouldn't know what to do about that. But with the virus, like, you know, again, like we're just doing things in clinical trials. Like I'm not a doctor, so I can't offer medical advice. I can tell you that like one of the clinical trials we're starting to run at Mount Sinai, where I'm also the scientific director of a clinic at Mount Sinai called CORE that's working to treat long COVID. We're trialing Truvada, which is an antiviral that has been shown to have activity against Epstein-Barr virus in some studies, and maybe a little bit of activity against SARS-CoV-2. So we know some patients are, you know, kind of been doing like a Truvada direction to see if like maybe that could affect like either the herpes viruses or maybe SARS-CoV-2 persistence in some cases. That's like one of the clinical trials that we're running. Another clinical trial, again, like this is a problem, like we don't have access to these things. We do think that the monoclonal antibodies like that were developed, you know what I mean? Like these are like antibodies that can kind of invigorate the immune system to go back and find, you know, virus or cells expressing protein. Though we're starting to trial those in long COVID. So there's a group looking at that. And I know that anecdotally, there was a case series where some patients with, I think it was almost like 3 patients with long COVID, but they took, I think it was the Regeneron, their drug company's monoclonal antibody, and it really helped their long COVID symptoms. This was a case series. Again, suggesting that like maybe a monoclonal antibody can kind of come in and get the immune system to help clear out like any remaining virus, right? So like, so that's some of the stuff that's like on the stage, or like antivirals beyond Paxlovid, monoclonal antibodies, you know, like that's stuff that I hope that, you know, can be trialed and thus like potentially brought more into clinics, although they're not, it's not something it's not things you can get, you can't just go ask, like, especially you can't go ask your doctor for monoclonal right now per se. I think, you know, I mean, the anti-clotting stuff that you've been doing makes sense, even if it were viral persistence, because even Ricia and Doug have done this experiment where they took the SARS-CoV-2 S1 protein and they added it to blood, to platelet poor plasma blood, and basically those microclots formed. So there's a direct relationship between the spike protein and the microclots. In fact, maybe the microclots might even like harbor, like it might even kind of like be a little place that like spike could be trapped in. We're not sure. So if you break those up,
I believe it does. Yeah. As far as I understand it, it's like spike and fibrin and other platelets, all stuff trapped in there. And as the anticoagulants are breaking this down, I'm noticing like the symptoms for the first couple of months were really bad. It's almost like my body's fighting to react to everything that's trapped inside. Yeah.
But see, and that's a kind of known concept in the treatment of infection, that is that like sometimes people do have to feel worse if a treatment's actually working, because the treatment is actually like revealing the organism more, or allowing the immune system to finally recognize the pathogen or the protein, and that leads to like now it's actually like fighting, right? And so that's why you can feel. So actually, the fact that you felt worse could be exactly a good sign that you were maybe releasing virus or whatever, spike or something, and maybe cleaning up at least part of it, you know? I don't know.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on why? I mean, I think so. I believe that the clotting happens in pretty much all long or COVID acute infection cases, as far as I've seen in papers. I might be wrong on that. Just someone correct me if I am. But what I'm seeing is that the people with long COVID aren't able to now break down those clots that formed and kind of get the immune system back to normal. And do you think that's a gut health related thing? That's
Yes.
like one of the root causes.
It could be a factor, yes, because because even before COVID, if you look at Ricia's lab's research, what they were actually studying was that bacteria can form similar, like fibrin amyloid deposits, similar to what's found in those clots. So they were even looking at how like this oral organism that like a pathogen that can kind of sometimes get into the blood, how proteins from that bacteria could actually see these similar type microclots. And similar for, so for sure, like if you're a patient with long COVID and let's say maybe you don't clear the virus from your gut, or maybe the virus just messes up your gut and it's in bad shape, the lining of the gut like can get like worn down. So leaky gut, right? Like we kind of hear that a lot, right? And then if that's the case, like bacteria that are supposed to be in the gut might leak more into the blood. And if that's the case, those bacteria might seed like a type of like fibrin microclot that's pretty similar to what I think the spike, SARS-CoV-2 spike protein kind of also seeds. So the people who have like the bacteria also kind of forming that fibrin and everything easily could have like, worse, kind of more persistent extra, you have this extra factors that might be contributing to the clotting, which could definitely be if you had one of the reasons why they might have more trouble breaking them up or getting rid of them. So and same from the mouth, like the oral cavity too. Like if people have like problems with the virus or just the oral organisms can also kind of like go out of balance and become problematic, and those can leak into the blood. So like if you kind of have like problems with the gut microbiome or the mouth and those organisms, that can seed like could easily be like this factor that's making microclots worse in certain people. And so you could definitely like try then to do treatments that kind of improve leaky gut, and
gut health.
Like there's a book called The Gut Health Protocol that I've followed like a couple times in my life. It's a protocol you can order. Like you cut down on carbs and sugars, which are, a lot of the bad bacteria can eat. You take supplements that you can order, at least here in the US, you can order them on Amazon. And they kind of help maybe strengthen the gut lining. You do like probiotics. You try to repopulate the gut with better bacteria. So I don't think it's a cure. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure if that's going to like totally cure anyone, but I think that part of trying to get better from this stuff is like trying to hit it from every angle, So if you could improve your gut barrier, the leaky gut a little, get the gut bacteria in better shape through kind of something like a protocol like that, I feel like it wouldn't hurt, and you're kind of trying to like mitigate every variable to see if you can. So I think it's something you could try to pursue.
Thanks. I'm definitely, I can relate to that whole conversation. I know a lot about gut health. I had a friend, a close family friend, who struggled with ME/CFS, so your chronic fatigue syndrome. I can't remember the whole myalgic endothelial, whatever.
It's hard.
The acronym is. But anyways, she actually got better by treating her gut health and cutting out gluten and cutting out like sugars. And I've also spoken to a doctor recently who said I need to kind of potentially do a carnivore diet and cut out those carbs and the sugars, like you say, that the bacteria can feed on, and you almost need to kind of control your gut health. Because what I was actually going to share is that I was quite disheartened. Like I just wanted to cry when I found out about the spike antibody test that I did. That my body still has all the spike. I couldn't understand it. I'm like, I've been on blood thinners for 7-8 months now. I'm treating the blood vessel damage and the endothelial, trying to get that to heal. Endothelial lining and all of that. And I thought that was like my one-stop solution was taking anticoagulants. And now during on my journey, I'm realizing it's actually, I've got the spike issue now, which I now need to treat as well. So now I'm looking at gut and other methods and ways to treat that. Yeah. Yeah. So right now I've been on the blood thinners for 9.5 months. I'm still seeing the microclotting. I'm still seeing the hyperactivation of platelets, which I think I can definitely say the anticoagulants have helped. But I'm on that journey now where I was hoping that they would get me to 100%, but they're not. And that's why I was like so disheartened to find out about the antibodies that my body is either still making spike, or it's a viral persistence, like you say, where there's just so much spike that it's like my body's fighting it every day. But that's not 2.5 years down the line, which is really tough. But really, I agree with you in like saying, just realizing to myself, I think, is I can't just treat the blood vessel damage and like try and heal the endothelium. That's obviously helping a lot, but I need to treat the spike as like the root issue. And how do I get rid of that? And a big part of that is gut health, amongst other things that I'm still learning about. Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to try because, for example, there's a clinical trial we're supporting at Harvard in children where what they found is that the children don't clear the virus again from their guts, right? But then that leads to leaky gut, like we're talking about. And then again, that causes the spike protein to be able to leak into the blood. And so the trial is this drug liraglutide that can help repair the leaky gut. And they have just very, very early data, but they have some kids where just giving them that drug to repair the gut barrier really did help. Like, so maybe, what could happen is, whatever, to get your hopes up, but like, even if, let's say the virus is in your gut, and maybe that's part of why spike protein could still be in your blood. Maybe if you work on your gut and try to get it into better shape in any other way. So let you work on the gut lining to try to improve it. You work on the bacterial organisms to try to make them into a better balance, right? With the probiotics and fermented foods and stuff. All of that just creates a better immune atmosphere, honestly, in your gut, where it's like, put it this way, like, again, this is the way I picture it. Like, if your gut has all these other problems with the microbiome and the immune system's going to be caught up with all of those other things. And if you fix those, maybe it can focus and get the persistent virus, and knock it out. And then, so maybe actually by helping other gut issues, you kind of free up your immune system to go after persistent virus. It's like, it's worth a shot. Like, I mean, so I think like it's a reasonable path to try. Yeah.
Why, if you, in your opinion, if you do know of this, why does a virus in the gut not go away? Like, why doesn't your immune system or your body fight that or destroy it, or like you excrete it out? Why does it stay there? I can't really.
I know
imagine that. Yeah.
This is $1 million question, honestly, is why. But like the first thing is that the gut is a really very hospitable site for SARS-CoV-2 to persist. First of all, the virus gets into the gut in a lot of people, right? So it's like so many people have guts, and we know now that like in a lot of cases it just gets right into the gut. The tissue of the gut is super high. In fact, it's the tissue in the human body that most expresses the ACE2 receptors that the virus uses for entry. So it's like, boom, it's just like it can just totally enter the gut. Once it's kind of in the tissue, it's that makes it like an extra easily infectable place for it to kind of stick around, right? Now, part of why it could, again, part of why it could stick around, what we think is that likely because the immune system, there might be problems with the immune system. We probably think that, and this could be from the virus itself. I mean, viruses always want to continue surviving. So they can downregulate, like they can make the immune system around the area where they're in worse. So we see very early data in some studies that the natural killer cells, or maybe even the T cells near where the virus kind of embeds in the gut, the virus is almost like sinking their activity a little bit so that it's less well recognized. So in other words, it's kind of muting the immune system near where it is, so that the immune system can't really find it, can't really totally get at it. So, because that's really key to understand, is like our immune system fights viruses, but then all viruses have developed all of these strategies and tactics to mute or disable the immune response to fight back. So if you get the virus and it kind of sticks around, it starts to do those things. It starts to knock down like parts of the immune system. And if, that's at least part of it. But then again, like why this happens maybe in more people, in certain people than others, not totally sure. It could be, part of it could be it could be due to infectious history, for example. So like, I'm not sure, again, this is just like hypothesizing, but in your case, maybe you are struggling with a herpes virus infection or like Epstein-Barr virus to a point, right? Maybe your immune system's caught up a little dealing with that virus, and thus when you got SARS-CoV-2, it wasn't as able to fight or get rid of SARS-CoV-2 as it would have in someone who didn't already have that other viral problem that was keeping the immune system. So like we see that often in people, even with the ME/CFS diagnosis that you mentioned your friend had before, where if you really start to talk to someone, it's like they've had a series of infections or kind of exposures across their lifetime, where as a kid, sometimes they had problems with a certain infection, and then maybe sometimes they had like a mold exposure or problems with a chemical or another infection kind of. So you see what we call different hits in people's cases where it could be that sort of an added effect of some different infections or problems that they have over time is sort of kind of making their immune system less robust. And then finally, when they get something like SARS-CoV-2 or whatever, it's kind of the last straw, and they really struggle with that. And that's the infection that they most remember and notice, but kind of the history of the infections or exposures or problems that have been building up. And that includes problems with the microbiome or the gut, like over time, have kind of been cumulative over a while. And then that kind of becomes part of why one person just doesn't do that well with SARS-CoV-2 or not, right? So that's possibly some of the factors, although we definitely have to study that more.
In your opinion, is chronic fatigue syndrome or ME/CFS also linked to blood vessel or like clotting issues? Maybe like from the leaky gut thing, because I wonder, because of the chronic fatigue I now feel, because I know the oxygen and nutrients aren't transferring correctly around my blood. I wonder if even prior to COVID even existing, or the pandemic itself, is chronic fatigue syndrome also getting this endothelial damage? And I don't know that answer. I'm just wondering.
So a good question. The truth is that ME/CFS has not been very well studied. There's been so little funding and just energy to even study people with ME/CFS that we don't have as much data as we would like to. And one of the things I think that is interesting with the history of ME/CFS, and again, these are patients who basically got sick before COVID, often after other infections, that like just, that is that the way that myalgic, it's called myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic, like the way that that name and the whole kind of condition started was actually that there were these outbreaks starting in the 40s, 1950s, and through the 1980s, where clusters of people in different locations. One famous outbreak was in Lake Tahoe in the United States. One was in Iceland. These different locations, people all got sick at the same time, and no one could explain why. And someone would come investigate. And the thing, though, is that the tools and technologies that people had to look for infections or in people were pretty pathetic. There was like no chance in it. So in a way that they were going to really identify pathogens or what the problem was in these outbreaks were low because of the lack of good tools and technologies. But you had this phenomenon where people were becoming sick at the same time. And they, in some of these cases, and in fact, a good number of these outbreaks, they were able, though, to at least tentatively link them to an RNA virus that has a lot of similarities to SARS-CoV-2, the enterovirus family. So enteroviruses, like SARS-CoV-2, they're single-stranded RNA viruses. You can get them via, like a cold, a respiratory infection, but they sometimes get to your gut, and sometimes people get really sick, and sometimes people just have like mild cases. So these outbreaks were linked to the enteroviruses, which so one of the research areas in ME/CFS that hasn't been studied well, but is really interesting that we're trying to actually start again is that persistence of these enteroviruses in the gut could be one of the factors that could affect some of the ME/CFS cases. And in fact, there's a doctor in California who's found this enteroviruses very similar to SARS-CoV-2 in the gut tissue of ME/CFS patients. So you have this same, again, it doesn't have to be everything, but you have a lot of parallels where the virus could end up in the gut, maybe persist. That could throw off the gut lining, that could throw off the microbiome, that could lead then to problems with leakage of bacteria or other proteins in the blood. That could lead to platelet activation, that could lead to neutrophil extracellular traps, that could damage the blood vessels. Like all of the same sort of series of events can kind of happen in ME/CFS. And I actually worked with Ricia's team. We did a study of microclots. Yeah, I'm on that paper, like if the ME/CFS microclots. Yeah, no, I've known Ricia for a long time. She's amazing. Like where we got blood from ME/CFS patients, and as you probably know, they had microclots, just not as profound as the long COVID patients. Like they were not really, you know, they were a little bit smaller, sometimes a little less dense, but they were there.
But it was abnormal clotting that you were seeing.
But there was there was this abnormal clotting. We see some of the platelet hyperactivation too. Just the long COVID was more, but the ME/CFS still had the same kind of phenomenon. So yes, like I think that there's a lot of those parallels between long COVID and ME/CFS, but I have to say that I think the spike protein, that SARS-CoV-2 releases, it is just the ultimate. It is that protein drives such clotting in blood. You know, it is so brutal on the blood vessels that the long COVID is probably why the long COVID patients or people who have the SARS-CoV-2 infections really suffer with the blood vessel stuff. Whereas the ME/CFS, the viruses that contribute can have maybe some effect. Maybe not as bad though as the people who have spike protein involved. Yeah.
What's interesting to me is like even family, friends, and just people I've met across the journey so far, I've noticed what they are noticing and telling me is that even though they don't have long COVID or they don't have what they call post-COVID syndrome, they got COVID itself. They had the vaccine, they got better, they were fine. But it's almost like what they shared to me is like, Chris, I'm getting sick more often than I used to. And it's almost like, has it done something to our immune systems, either the vaccines or the virus? And then, like you say, the spike protein is so damaging. And if you're like me on that side now, where I'm very, again, it's been years of like going back and forth, but I'm now very like, I guess, pro like a lab leak theory is like, it must have been this, but you know, but it's like, it's done so much damage. But it's just fascinating to me that our immune systems have been compromised, you know, that normal healthy people are still getting sick more often now.
Right. I mean, if you look at like, if it's lab leak, or I mean, it's another reason. Like, I mean, I guess we're not sure, but obviously there was research being done on labs and coronaviruses. Like, it's another reason that you would kind of be worried about this virus. I mean, like it obviously is a, you know, virus that was being, you know, studied a lot for and worked on for capacities that could drive disease, right? So like it's another reason that like just it's not like as much as like I'm truly so burned out. I am so burned out on COVID. I am like I totally get it. I get how people are just like just don't want to hear it. And but I think considering that SARS-CoV-2 really is still a problem, it is a problem to get SARS-CoV-2,
mm,
is that there are some things we can do about it that are not vaccines. And I think like one of the problems has been a narrative that okay, the only thing we can do if we want to care about COVID is get vaccinated with 1 million boosters and hide and or nothing. And that's not true. There's one really, really important middle ground, and that's cleaning indoor air. We work in parallel with groups now where you can take a room, the room I am in now, and you, with a combination of well-designed HEPA filters that can pull virus out of the air, and also new technology, we have far germicidal UV, so it's actually UV light that you can put it into bulbs that are like regular lights, but the UV comes down through the air and kills viruses.
That's
Between
really
like
cool.
these, oh no, it's amazing technology. And there are groups working on this. And if you take a school, for example, where kids are just, I'm sorry, it's really not great, like getting sick all the time with, and not just COVID, like RSV and strep and this and everything. And you would just put in these incredibly better HEPA filters, and the UV you would drop without having to mask more, without having to, I mean, you could,
social
but
distance.
you could, by just cleaning indoor air, you could greatly, greatly lower the virus that would be in that room. Not to mention that you would lower pollutants and smoke and mold and all these other things that we don't want in the air anyway. So that's one of the things that we really think should happen, because like where we could reduce transmission and honestly reduce how much SARS-CoV-2 if we put these clean indoor air solutions into train stations, into crowded buildings, we would really, really lower viral spread. And so that is to me like one of the biggest things that I'm into right now. For example, at the clinic in Mount Sinai that I'm working at, we're doing that. We're working with a group, and they took the clinic, they brought in the best HEPA filters, they brought in these UV lamps. They actually brought in PCR testing, but really rapid PCR testing that can tell you if you have COVID or RSV quickly, right? And even carbon dioxide monitors to help monitor the air. Between all of that, if someone comes to our COVID clinic with long COVID, and let's be honest, like if you have long COVID, the last thing you need is to get COVID at the doctor. The chances of getting COVID in the clinic are almost as low as being hit by lightning, like with these. So we can change that. So I think that, so put it this way, I think that we still have to care somewhat about SARS-CoV-2. We don't want these repeated infections that keep seeding us with spike protein, with a virus that increasingly seems persistent. We don't. So there's got to be a middle ground of people that understand that the pandemic has been really bad on so many fronts, and yet like getting SARS-CoV-2 for the rest of our lives isn't good either. And we got to find something in the middle.
I love those thoughts. Thanks, Amy. I was speaking to a friend recently. I was just saying, like, I was of the opinion that, okay, this pandemic is here now. We're all locked up. We're all like fearful. The vaccines don't exist yet. And I was just like, okay, it's very black and white in my mind, at least it was at the time. I'm like, okay, either it's really bad and you die, or you survive and you carry on with life and you're fine. And now it's like, no, there's hundreds of thousands of people that have now got these post-infection effects, post-vaccine effects, and it's like this big mess. And it's hard for us, I think, as long haulers or vaccine injured people, watching people just carry on with life as it's as if it's fine. Oh, it's done. Cool, we made it through. Let's get on with life and making money and spending and whatever.
I know.
But yeah, like you're saying, it's scary to think COVID is still out there. In my head, I'm even like, oh, COVID doesn't exist. It's just now the flu again, like that we get every year.
I mean, and
we beat it,
I
but
get it. Like it's like we can't ever, like it's not useful every day to just freak out and so that's why I think but first of all, with the vaccines, don't like, I don't even, you don't have to get them anymore. I mean, I'm not saying like I'll just stay out of that, but like at least you can just choose not to get a vaccine. The problem with the
Yeah.
virus is like it's not going like you
Mm.
can't choose to not get. Like
It's not a,
that's gonna keep
yeah.
going,
Yeah.
right? And it just I
Yeah.
mean like there's a team that got, I'll just say, like tissue, tonsil tissue from children that were undergoing routine
Mm-hmm.
surgeries to get their tonsils removed, right? And
Mm.
they looked
Mm.
for SARS-CoV-2 in that tissue up to well over a year after the kids had gotten infected. And again, like this is the virus,
Mm.
not the spike from the vaccine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the majority of kids still had the viral RNA in their tonsil tissue. So like we're looking at this possibility that this
Wow.
virus can stick around, whether it's even causing symptoms in low level, sneaky ways in
Mm.
children, in our guts, in our tissue. There's teams that have found it years after infection in parts of the brain. We don't really want to
Mm.
mess with this, like because
Mm.
viruses are being connected now increasingly to Alzheimer's disease and to like Parkinson's. Like we
Mm.
don't. I just
Mm.
don't think it's sustainable to keep
Mm.
getting these infections again and again. And so, and I
Yeah.
do see that. Like I have friends where they're like, "Oh, I'm fine," but then they will say like, "Except for the fact that I can't run anymore," you know, and I can, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, but
That's not
who,
fine.
right? And they've gotten 8 COVID infections, right? So who knows? I just, it's a big gamble to be doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not sure what
Sure.
the perfect solution is, but we've got to form groups
Mm.
of people that are willing to talk about SARS-CoV-2 more normally, you know, and
Yeah.
address the fact that this virus is still around, look for solutions. Not, I'm not saying with but like other solutions, like the clean air, like not like stuff like
Mm.
that doesn't have to be
Mm.
a vaccine, like other
Mm.
things, and
Yeah.
try to
Wait. So sorry.
again try to
Sorry.
find a little bit of balance.
Sorry to interrupt. Um, I was going to ask. So these UV lights, are they special like LEDs or bulbs that or UV bulbs they've made? So or is it like, can I just go
Yeah.
buy like a normal UV bulb and that would
No,
help? You know? Yeah.
no. So they're special. It's a special
Okay.
far UVC, and there's a lot of I
Yeah.
think the first company. I quite literally think the first company that's making them is the one we're putting in our clinic. So you can't go buy them
Okay.
yet, but there's lots of
Wow.
groups working on them.
Yeah.
But one thing that's really
Yeah.
just is that I've seen pictures of the White House in the US, in the government main building.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
above the table where all the government people are is just a big, giant far UVC light. So it's really interesting to think that, you know,
Wow.
our government leaders do care
Have
about
that. Yeah.
SARS-CoV-2 and they have the
Yeah.
light, right? You know, they have that germicidal UVC right there, but we're just
Yeah.
supposed to, you know, breathe in this really crappy air all the time. So the
Yeah.
thing is like,
Mm.
if you think about again, clean air, it's just my like when it comes to water, we cleaned water like a while back. Like if you go
Mm.
get tap water from your house and you get a glass, maybe it's not perfect, but if you drink it, you don't think like you're going to get diphtheria or cholera or something. And that's because we were like,
Mm.
let's clean and filter water that goes to people's homes.
Mm.
So right now
Yeah.
we just need to say like, let's clean air also. Like let's take these
Yeah.
really cool technologies and people and clean our indoor air so that we don't always have like
Mm.
it's entirely possible in a really good way.
Mm.
Like if you're burned out on SARS-CoV-2 but you're still like a little worried, what I recommend is read about that stuff and see if you think that you can help push
Mm.
solutions like that forward.
Yeah. So you mean burned out in the sense like talked about too much, not like burnt out like emotionally like depressed or
No,
something
well,
like
I just mean
physically.
like if you know if you don't like today feel like talking about COVID and how it's just still out there and everything,
Mm.
but you
Mm-hmm.
kind of, you know, and I feel like a lot of people deep down kind of like, I don't, like they know it's not great to be getting COVID all the time, but they don't think there's anything they can do. So that's where they kind of really tune out, right? I mean, I get it. But
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
feel like instead of totally tuning out, I recommend looking into the fire germicidal UV and some of this stuff. And
Okay.
there's
Wow.
groups that
Yeah.
are promoting it, like look at them so
Yeah.
that we can maybe help kind of usher in support to get this stuff into buildings that matter.
I was going to say, like, to listeners, don't go and like take some UV bulbs from a club that's
No,
like
don't do
purple and
that.
think
No, no,
that's going to
no.
help. That's not going to help.
No, yeah, no. They're
Um,
exactly. They're specific bulbs. So yeah, do not do that. That sounds probably dangerous. But so yeah,
I will
don't. But
say,
look
I
into
actually,
the companies.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say, I actually came across a video of Dyson, you'll probably know as like their vacuum cleaners and things. I would love to get one day, but they're like 16,000 Rand. So like probably 800 to
Yeah.
$1,000 for a vacuum cleaner. So,
Yeah.
but they also make great air filtration systems, and I've heard about their HEPA filters and everything. So if I had all the money in the world, I'd buy a couple of Dyson, air purifiers, and they've even got headphones
Right.
now that have this little mask. Obviously, you
Exactly.
look completely ridiculous, but
Yeah, to me, I see, I don't care. Like if I'm, and I know that people I'm sure think I'm crazy. If I'm in an airport or something and I don't know
yeah.
anyone, I don't care. I wear a fitted
Would
N95.
would
Like
okay? Would you really wear those Dyson headphones in an airport though?
maybe I don't care. I don't. I really don't care. Though,
Okay.
I would,
Yeah.
if it kept me, like, let's say, because usually I'm going somewhere fun on a trip. I honestly just really don't want to get sick. If it just meant that it was the most
Mm,
confidence that I wouldn't get sick, I probably would. I don't know. I
so,
haven't seen them though. If
you
they're,
yeah.
I don't
No,
know.
they
If
look
they're too
ridiculous.
ridiculous, well, yeah, I
It's
don't know.
yeah. It's quite
I don't
funny.
know.
Um,
Yeah.
I nearly thought of I was actually going to apply as like an ambassador program to test them and do reviews and
Yeah.
stuff, but I'm not big enough an influencer, and I don't think they ship them to South Africa. So I was like, whatever. But so just on that note, so you saying if you're at the airport now traveling, even now presently, are you still wearing a mask in 95?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I
okay.
I
Yeah.
wear, yeah, it's too hard to look. Every day I see or interact with all the patients who have long COVID and are suffering, children
Mm,
with long COVID, families who have lost, you
mm,
know, eh, people who have lost everything. And I see all the data of all the, damage that SARS-CoV-2
mm,
is causing and the virus still in people's tissue.
mm.
And under those circumstances, it's too hard for me to personally to tune out. And so I
Yeah.
wear a
Yeah.
fitted N95 when I'm in a like a crowded space, especially like if I go to the supermarket again, like I don't care. No one knows
Mm,
me. If I go to a crowded store, at least
mm,
put it this way, if I get COVID and I were to be, I would want to get it from something really fun and cool, like not
mm,
from going into a supermarket store. So to me,
mm,
I still wear a fitted N95. And I think that's a whole, with masks,
mm.
like I, unless this is another thing that just got bungled, a surgical mask isn't going to do much, or if anything, like the virus just comes in the sides of the mask. I mean, this is what has been so hard. Like the only mask that's going to work is an
Mm.
N95 that's totally fitted on your face. Like there can't be any air coming in on any, and
Oh
you'll
my
see someone wearing a
word.
mask and they have it kind of hanging. Well,
Yeah.
it doesn't like,
But aren't you
it's
aren't you talking
matter.
about like a chemical filter now? Like a
No,
not
I
those ones.
wear
Okay, because
this
I've
one.
worn them when I spray paint and stuff before.
I wear
Um,
this one, this
mm,
Aura 3, it's like Aura brand
yeah,
N95. And it's like it
yeah,
does have the bands that go around like your head, but it keeps it
yeah,
on. And then it has these things on the nose that you can kind of go like this. And I like it because I can really feel
yeah.
that it like fits on my nose. And then
Yes,
I
yes,
can
yes.
tell that the only air I'm breathing is coming through. But then it's not that bad. Like I can talk, it's a pretty thin otherwise mask.
Mm,
So it's
mm,
not, I can do stuff with
yeah,
it. So that's the one I wear. But yeah, unless
yeah.
you fit it, like if you have one of those though, and that's what I think, like,
I,
I
I,
mean,
I
people
wouldn't
don't
wear
know
that
that.
out.
Really? I would though. Come on
Yeah,
though. You don't want,
yeah,
the last thing you want is another infection, right?
yeah.
I mean, I just don't know. Like, I agree. The
Uh,
world now sucks.
uh,
Like, there's no,
yeah,
it's not great. And I
yeah,
wish it weren't this way, but
yeah.
I don't
Wow.
want
I must say
another.
a hard part for me, I guess, with anyone in lockdown was the that N95 that we at least had here was the cheap white one that like
Eh,
you see in a hospital. and it was
Yeah.
so itchy on your face, even with the little
Mm,
wire bridge for your nose.
no.
It's like you still have air gaps, and I just like I couldn't wear it, so I ended up buying a lot of buffs. There's like little sock
Yeah.
tube things, and I just
Yeah.
put that up, and it probably did bugger all, but like I was like, well, makes me feel better, makes other people feel better, whatever. So
That's
yeah,
another
yeah,
example of just, shouldn't happen. There's a couple groups working on better masks, which again, we have a lot of talented people in this world. Like if we want to
mm,
make
mm,
cool masks that block
mm,
this virus and are actually like, we can do it. So there's a couple of groups that are working on designs where, it's pretty well, like the colors are cool, like it actually really, it's
mm,
comfortable. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of mask we need. I agree with you. No one's going to wear like a terrible, itchy
mm,
N95. And
mm,
that's, yeah, again, like that what should have happened in this pandemic is we shouldn't have had to mandate anything. We should have just like had the best N95s, like the one I have that's actually pretty
mm,
decent. Made
mm,
those in mass, just given
mm.
those to people, like sent them
Yeah,
to their
yeah,
houses and been like, here, like
yeah,
if you don't even have to wear it, but here, if you want it,
mm,
here it is, right? And just
yeah,
kind of gotten people the stuff that was realistic, but we did not do that. So yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
If we ever have another pandemic and they bring back lockdown and masks, I'll send friends to your channel and you give them your mail to say, ask Amy what the best mask is. She'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah,
hope I'm in,
yeah,
I hope I'm cool enough that I'm kind of in the know now. Yeah. And I joke with my
yeah,
friends, like I'm totally cool on the COVID
yeah,
pathogen front.
yeah,
I'm cool. Yeah.
yeah.
I should know
Cool.
who to talk to.
Yeah.
Yep.
Amy, in closing, I just had one thought. Was specifically if I had all the money in the world and I flew to Massachusetts to see you and your team,
Yeah.
what tests would you do? What kind of would you take tissue samples, brain? Have you done brain samples? Would you do blood? What would you do to check like or to learn
Yeah.
from my me? Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't do brain samples, which is too bad, obviously. There's no safe way to
Mm-hmm.
get in someone's brain. So that's a big challenge. We have to do other kinds of
Yeah.
imaging and things for that. But I would actually probably send you to University of California, San Francisco, that has a biopsy
Mm-hmm.
program that we're supporting. And there you could get a gut biopsy, a lymph node biopsy, um,
Mm-hmm.
potentially. And that, well, I'd have you do those there. Then you could come to
Mm-hmm.
Boston. We have a punch small fiber nerve biopsy study. We could get
Mm-hmm.
some lung tissue from you from another group. We could do some really cool imaging on you. There's at the team in San Francisco, they can do two kinds of imaging. One where they can image activated T cells throughout your body, which is very interesting to see. And another that they're
Mm-hmm.
working on, they're starting soon, where they can actually find SARS-CoV-2 protein from the virus via their imaging, which is kind of cool throughout the body.
Wow.
We can do
Yeah.
here in Boston imaging where we can identify inflammation in your brain so that we could put you through a lot
Wow.
of workup. Honestly, we still
Mm,
wouldn't even totally be able to tell you what treatments to do, and that's the problem. You could enroll in some
mm,
clinical trials. You'd have to kind of move out here. Like you might be able to join a monoclonal antibody trial or something as long as you
yeah.
moved. But
You can test on me, but I
you
need you
could
to
do.
pay for my flights and accommodation and food. And
I wish. Tell the NIH
yeah, the
here that
dream.
they should
Yeah.
they do
The,
that. Yeah, because otherwise we'd
okay.
love
I
to.
will.
Yeah.
I will send them a tweet.
No, yeah, let them know.
Get
Cool.
Elon to represent me. Yeah. But
I
Amy, thank you
tell
so much for
him.
your time. Yeah. Yeah. I
I
really
wish.
appreciate your time and just sharing some of your insights into your studies on long COVID and ME/CFS and Lyme disease. I'm sorry we didn't get to chat about that. I would love to learn about it as well. But yeah, I'll put your link to your X or Twitter handle
Yeah,
below, and
cool.
yeah, I'm sure people would love to follow along your journey and learn about everything you're learning in your research. Yeah, but thanks
Definitely.
again.
No, thanks. It's really good
Mm,
to meet you. I hope that good luck with
mm,
you. Just continued, you've been really proactive so far. So I'm encouraged that, you
mm.
can keep trying treatments. And I hope
Yeah,
that on our side, we can get some more options out for
Yeah.
you. But it's good
It's
to be in touch.
it's a very difficult condition because it's something chronic. There's no like silver bullet to heal it. But I think I'm one of those people who's like a problem solver. I'll never stop trying to fix a
Exactly.
problem. Like it, you know, so in some cases in life you can let things be, but in this case I'm like, this is my life, it's my health, it's everything, you know, it affects your relationships, jobs, you know, work, everything. Yeah, and it's like I cannot stop wanting to learn and to try and get better.
I agree.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good luck.
But yeah, thank you so much, Amy. Have a great evening, and
Same.
good to connect with you. Cool.
Same. Bye.
Thanks.